Hello there. My name is Tara Welling, and I'm going to talk to you today about a graphic that I built earlier today, which is incredibly complicated. I mean, this graphic is so complicated that it's difficult to contain in what I've already been built. Now, uh, for my viewers on Instagram, I can't put the graphic up. So I really can't put, at this point in time, I really can't put the graphic that's on my big TV, that direction, on so you can see the graphic. But for my for my YouTube fans, I can put it about right here. So something I found a number of years ago regarding the subject is that when you look at the river, the Mississippi River, the Missouri, the Arkansas, and the Rio Grande, it makes this shape: 1/3, 2/3, with the connection here. Now, this shape is also the shape that you're going to find. The Capitoline Hill is here, and the Esquiline Hill, the uh, the um, the Roman Forum, and the Vilia Hill, and this would be the Palatine Hill. This right here would be the Palatine Hill. So this is extremely important because I theorize that basically right here is where the trial of Jesus Christ took place in the Forum. The not the maximum farthest end of the western portion of the Forum, but pretty close. It's within a little over a dozen feet from the temples of Saturn is to the south side, but the temples of Concord and whatever the temple is to the immediate north of the Temple of Concord, and then of course the immediate right of to the immediate north of that, as you're looking west, the immediate right of that would be the temple, the prison where traitors and prisoners and such were held before they were brought out the front door to Traitors Post, otherwise known as the after 250 BC AD. The Traitors Post was renamed to the Umbilicus of Rome, partially to hide the events that happened at that specific point a large number of times. All traitors to the Roman Empire were tried on that spot, at least previous to about 80 AD. After that, things were changed a little bit, but that's not the point. Those rivers in America make the character of Shin. The character of Shin plays into the infrastructure of the settling of America based off the fact that the French and the British created a rather significant infrastructure of buildings and cities and pillars and the like, and of course good negotiations with the natives, as opposed to what the British, the Spanish, the Italians, so on and so the Prussians did. The natives to those cultures were annoyances that were just fine and dandy to kill, mass murder, genocide, whatever. To the British and the Royal French and such, the natives were people to interact with, negotiate with, and then ultimately work with, and have a equitable interaction with them on the American continent. This, which embarrassed the Prussians and the English and the Spanish and the Muslims from the Iberian Peninsula, embarrassed them to the point where they couldn't handle it, and instead of being cool with it, they decided to kill all involved, at least as much as they could, destroy all involved, everything involved, and then do as much as they damage to they could to the infrastructure that had been built for several centuries. Well, part of that infrastructure was a palace in a place called Bancroft Park, in a place in what has been known after 19, 1858, 1857 as Old Carter City. Before that, it had a different name. Most likely, it was called the City of Rocky Mountain, and before then, it had a different name. What it was has been long lost to history. See, there was in the part of this infrastructure that happened was that in the early to middle 1840s, there was two, well, more than that, but there was two profoundly huge gold rushes. One in Pikes Peak, which is the Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo comes directly from that event. The go to the Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo, which also has some serious ties to a movie that was written by a Jewish writer who wrote the script for a movie called "Paint Your Wagon" with Clint Eastwood. Well, part of that story is based off of the founding of Carter Springs. Well, Old Carter City, what it was, because it was the no-name city. Well, to one side of the no-name city would be Manitou, and the other side of no-name city would be an odd settlement that has been almost entirely obliterated from history. In order to be able to have the Carter Springs there, they're hard and solid, and anything that was in existence before Carter Springs was there, General Palmer and Elpamar and there are a bunch of their other Puritan and Prussian friends. They has been entirely scrubbed from history since I grew up in Carter Springs. It's been scrubbed. I found out most of the stuff after, and from innuendos and stuff, as my mother took me to various assorted historical locations to learn from them. I learned from them. It just took me 25, 30 years to be able to process the information and to be able to let my mind do what it does, to be able to start to decode some of the key information. Like there was a full-scale clandestine war between the ex-Confederates, who were still Confederates, but under a clandestine operation under Margaret Davis Hayes, the daughter of Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. She took over after the Civil War in the colonies was over, and she took over and ran the war from Carter Springs for the next about 40 years. There's another branch of the Confederacy that also ran the war from a place called Linden, Washington State. That's an entirely interesting concept altogether, but we're talking about Carter Springs. Carter Springs is the headwaters, at least one of the major headwaters for the Arkansas River that runs directly through the middle of Tulsa. Well, at least Tulsa grew on either side of the Arkansas River. Well, if you draw Shin, this line of Shin, Tulsa is right in the middle of it. Although it's things become a little bit weird and interesting and the like, which is kind of fun to watch because the things that are weird and odd and interesting and such are the stuff where the real truth of history lies. I will give you a solid, substantial example of this. The facts of the situation are that the Cleopatra came to Rome as a teenager. Already, either Caesarion was born, or he was still in the womb, or something to that effect. She is a 6 foot, very strong, very powerful, with her own army, which was several times larger than the army of several of the senators who were 5'2", fat, had not been in combat for years, and when the last time they were in combat, they put on their ceremonial armor and just kind of sat back and waited, watched their troops do what troops do, and they couldn't have done anything in a battle other than bleed really, really well. So that's not nowhere near the point. So a 5'2", fat, lazy senator who was only interested in filling his pocket, feeling pleasure and money, power, and such. it stood between Cleopatra, who was 6 foot tall, a teenager, quite attractive, and had her own army that was bigger than about a dozen senators. So her army was bigger than theirs. Now, remember, they're the ones that wrote the history, not her. Your enemy writes your history for you, not you don't, because anything you write down or document or detail is the first line of the things that this group destroys. They then rewrite your history in favor of them, not what your facts, details, and evidence. So the plan from Cleopatra was to, on a given signal, she had her army stop fighting and run away and abandon her. Now the Romans were like, oh yeah, we bad. But in hard fact reality, the plan is for her to have her army disband, scatter, regroup. A quarter of the army was going to regroup in Italy, north of Rome proper, and the other half and the other 3/4 were going to regroup in Northumberland, although it wouldn't be called Northumberland for about 750, 800 years. It would not be called. It was still called the Kingdom of Ogle, and they would regroup there. So in 15, 20 years, when she did need to evac, well, a little less than 20 years, when she did need to evac because of the situations in Rome were too difficult for her to stay, she evac'd, and her army had 20 years to train and to build defenses and build offenses, train, recruit more people, grow the army by exponentially based off of the allies that the British had in Scandinavia and what would be called France in several centuries, Normandy and the like. Although Normandy wouldn't really exist for another 750 years or so. The same people that wrote her history and wrote that she was captured on some day somewhere. We don't know nothing about nothing. She was captured on some time. Just before then, the battle of Actium, every second of the battle for that couple of hours was documented by a number of different scribes who wrote everything down as much as detailed humanly possible, down to the second. A bit later, she's captured somewhere, somehow, somewhere, something. We don't know who, what, when, where, why, or how. We just know she was captured because that's what these guys, the rich, lazy 5'2" guys said happened, because they wrote the history down and the history was adopted as if the propaganda actually happened. Now, if propaganda were true, then President Obama would have been impeached about 400, 500, 600 times in his 8 years in office, because Fox News every day ran a story about, we're about to impeach him. We almost have enough evidence to impeach him. We're just right. We're almost there. We need to do a countdown to the impeachment. Pure fiction. Absolute fantasy. Psychotic, schizophrenic, paranoid delusional schizophrenia fantasy. Needing medication in a rubber room time, their danger to themselves and others. Fantasy. It never happened. It was never even close to happening. He never did anything close to being wrong. The problem is that the propaganda says that he did. So several hundred years from now, if Fox News if Fox News's media library is still in existence, and CNN and MSNBC and several other news sources and such, and newspapers and such, they're all destroyed, then 1,000 years from now, there's going to be one source of documentation, and it's going to be believed, despite the fact that it is mostly fiction. At least on some subjects. Now, to be clear, the reason why I described Cleopatra and a couple of other things is in these different historical situations is because there's a very, very, very long history of the conqueror. There's an extremely long history of the conqueror lying, about the true events that happened. These are the true events. These are what the conqueror wanted to talk about. So therefore, this is put on bonfires or what have you, or destroyed in whatever way, shape, or form. This information is what is kept, becomes history, and becomes the definition of. Well, of course, that's what happened. There's nothing there's no documentation contradicting this information. Well, this is because this is ash scattered to the four winds. So let's get into the habit of realizing that history is mostly propaganda, especially if it comes from 5'2" old fat guys. So the old fat guys wrote down what they wanted. Doesn't matter if they're called English. Doesn't matter if they're called Roman. Doesn't matter if they're called Agamemnon's culture. Doesn't matter if they're called Philistines. It doesn't matter if they're called Hyksos or Dorian. Doesn't matter if they're called Varus. Makes a difference. The same lies apply and apply and reapply and reapply and reapply. So, as we talk about Old Carter City and the Pikes Peak Brothers Rodeo being the movie Paint Your Wagon, at least part of what Paint Your Wagon was based off of, then we have to know that the French and the British created a infrastructure in Manitou and Old Carter City, and that infrastructure was there and designed to allow for the French and British to regroup. But to be able to regroup successfully and strategically, you have to have key castles and fortifications down the river system and key locations on the plains to be able to prevent being snuck up on and attacked. Well, the enemy, the English, the Picts, the Italians, the Spanish, the Prussians, so on and so forth, had learned a lot from the Pictish revolt from 650 AD up to 1066. They learned a lot. They learned that you can't just let the British go off and lick their wounds, regroup, and come back, because they will come back and they will become back bigger, better, harder, stronger, faster, better. And when they do come back, they will come back with a plan to destroy you. So let's prevent that. So when after the successes of Hastings, which lasted about 350, 400, 420 years or so, with those successes, when the English, when the British and the Ogle family and such were defeated again in Britain, they had to evac, and they evac'd to the American continent with negotiations and such. And there's a bunch of other details to back this up. So the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, became a tremendously huge city that both natives and the British, French, and such operated from and worked with and such, out of basically a copy of the city of Venice, which was itself a copy of the city where the Colosseum sits right now. 20 minutes later, I'm actually getting to a point that's interesting. The Shin is quite literally built into the infrastructure, to the architecture of the pyramids of Egypt, specifically the Khufu pyramid. The subterranean chamber, 2/3, the queen's chamber, 1/3, the king's chamber. So you have 1/3 king's chamber, queen's chamber, 2/3 subterranean chamber. Well, this is pretty close to the infrastructure of the Mississippi, the Missouri Arkansas River, and the Rio Grande River. It's a little things are a little oddly, but you have the Mississippi River that tributaries over that direction. You have the Arkansas River that the little bend here where this becomes really, really wide. This goes wide, this goes wide, and this goes wide as a character. The it's kind of it's a little weird to interact with. It doesn't match dead on the money perfectly, which is what I'm used to, but it matches more than 75%. So you're going to put key cities, key castles, and fortifications in a 360 around Old Carter City, or around what can be defined as the Capitoline Hill. Now, this infrastructure can be found, the Capitoline Hill, a close to dead on the money architecturally infrastructure can be found in a castle that was built in Manitou Springs, Colorado, in about 1895. Father Francolone, a French diplomat's son, a Catholic priest who had ties to the Avignon papacy, and was very, very rich. He petitioned the Pope after he had enough training in missions in America. He petitioned the Pope, and he then created his own mission, his own abbey and such, in Manitou Springs, Colorado, to spread the good word and to semi-fight against the concepts of Protestantism, which was pretty close to impossible in that area. Since I was raised in that area, I can tell you that the Protestant movement and the Great Awakening movement there are incredibly powerful, incredibly strong, very, very militant, and not interested in outsiders telling them that their version of the Bible happens to be anything other than God's honest truth. So, you have to have a fortification around that. So, Father Francolone hired Nikola Tesla to come wire his castle, 5-story castle, plus a 2 or 3-story cathedral off to the side. That 5-story castle is 240 feet wide, if I remember correctly. It's more than 210 feet wide, and the whole thing, every room was wired with electricity and had light bulbs that made at night the Miramont Castle the brightest thing within probably about 100 miles, if not 200 miles. It was basically it was one of the only thing wired. Now Tesla could produce millions of volts, billions of volts, and hundreds of amps, thousands of amps. The city of Colorado Springs, their electrical infrastructure was strong enough to be able to lightly power about 15 street lamps at about 15-20 volts. He could produce thousands, they could produce dozens. This was a significant embarrassment, humiliation, and a major anger point for General Palmer and the people of Colorado Springs. So those two men were very, very quickly, by the point of a bayonet, invited to leave the area and never come back, despite the fact that they were both rich. All of their stuff, all their possessions, and all the property they owned was confiscated by the state, by the city, and sold at auction to cover debts, which both men had more than enough money to be able to cover those debts and keep their property. But the point of it was to seize the property and sell it. And a lot of Tesla's stuff ended up in the hands of the Prussians, which is another story altogether. 70 years later, that stuff would end up in the hands of the Nazis. How the Prussians and Nazis are the same thing, that's a story for a different video. Actually, I think I've recorded a couple of videos about this. So, Father Francolone and Nikola Tesla designed Miramont Castle to reflect the Capitoline Hill. The Capitoline Hill, the Forum and the Villa Hill, the Esquiline Hill, and the Palatine Hill. Capitoline Hill. You have, if you look at Miramont Castle from the front, it matches, it's like 95+% dead on the money matching the Capitoline Hill as you're looking at it from the Forum. Where his bedroom may or may not have been, where a bedroom was, is where the Temple of Jupiter was. Parts of it are still there. Where his mother's bedroom was, at least they're very the people who operate the building are very patriarchal, so they don't think it through. They're not real interested in they're interested in the Great Awakening movement. They're interested in pursuing the concept of the Lord Jesus Christ, but they're not interested in things like facts and evidence. I don't mean to insult them, but I've had numerous conversations with them, and most of my ideas are go away, and by the way, shut up, and then go away. But shut up first and then go away. This has been the response from them at least three separate times in the last 6 years, 7 years. His mother's room, which was huge, fitting for a branch of the royal family diplomat and who was rich. His mother's room was approximately where the temple of Juno was, and the foundation still is partially, where that monstrosity thing that was built in the 1800s has been since then. That there's thousands of year old buildings that were destroyed to be able to make that building, and the Romans have tolerated that building ever since. But they'd rather tear that building down and put, at least as close as possible, put those temples back. Temples and some of the houses that building took over, put that back, but that is not going to happen because of a variety of situations and political stuff. But that's also where Christ rounded the corner from his trial with towing his cross with him. The crucifixion happened just outside of Rome proper, well, just across the river from the Tiber, just across the Tiber River, up the Vatican Hill, which was at that point called either Skull Mountain for Janus, the skull of Janus, and or the Vatican Hill where there was the Temple of Janus. To the west, there was a mound and then a divot and a mound, which is exactly the same way that the Capitoline Hill was also designed. There was a divot, a mound up here where the Temple of Juno was. The divot, and then on this hill was where the temple of Jupiter was. And some of the foundations are still there. However, the city of Rome was founded by who knows who it was founded by. It was conquered and renamed by Romulus and Remus, who performed the Memento Mori ceremony to be able to rebuild the culture based off of that ceremony and based off of what was going on. But the previous name for the city of Rome was the city of Samhain, Samhain. Although in Manx Gaelic it's not pronounced Samhain, it's pronounced Saban, Saben. Now, since the Latin English whatever letters of S A B and N did not exist yet, Seven did not exist yet, and the Arabic number system 1 through 9 number system 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Since the city of 7 hills could not be you could not use the character of 7, and you could not use the infrastructure of the letter of a language that the characters had not been invented yet. So they had to go with something that was in existence with that, and that would be the Gaelic Samhain, which is Halloween, October 31st. Which you have a face looking east, past, future. You have a face looking west, the past. So there's a whole Passover situation going on here, which makes it even more complicated. In a year, you have the east face of Janus, looking from March 22nd. Well, actually, you have the east face of Janus, March 22nd, looking forward. That is looking into the face of the west face of Janus, which is looking from Halloween, October 31st, backwards through the year. This is the light aspect of Passover. Then you have the other side. You have the dark aspects of Janus, which is from October 31st, obviously, until February 2nd. Now, the reason why it's not March 22nd is because of the exact same definitions that are in the concept of Groundhog's Day. From the dawn, it takes a while to wake up, to come out from darkness to light, It takes a while for the light to come back. Well, that's from February 2nd to March 22nd. So that's all involved. So you have, but the physical infrastructure and the biology of the two-headed deity of the two-headed, one face this way, one face that way, the two-headed deity of the Roman Empire, which was Janus. Janus is actually the pyramids of Rome. The pyramids of Rome and Janus are exactly the same subject. And the pyramids of Rome, the fourth pyramid, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, Judefre, Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, Memkare, M-E-M, space, K-A-U-R-E. At least that's what the guesstimation of to a language that has been dead for more than 4,000 years. That's what we guesstimate. How it's spelled. Take off the kare because it's Mem's sacred place. Well, that's what the Memkare pyramid means is Mem's sacred place. We'll take off the kare and keep the Mem. So you have the Pharaoh Mem's ceremony of Memento Mori. Memento Mori, M-E-M-E-N-T-O, space M-O-R-I, Memento Mori, which in this ceremony is very carefully constructed inside of the carving relief inside the north face of the Arch of Titus, which Rome, Capitoline Hill, is approximately there, right before you get to right off the shoulder, the south shoulder, the southwest shoulder of the temple of Venus. So you have the pyramids of Rome, the pyramids of Egypt, and the seven hills of Rome. There are 7 areas of pyramids in Egypt, and there's 7 hills of Rome. This is not a coincidence. So you have the infrastructure. You have Shin in Rome, in Khufu. Now, the Memkare pyramid and the Memento Mori ceremony. The Memento Mori ceremony was named for Pharaoh Mem, or in an aspect of that infrastructure. The pyramids, based on architecture, based on the building materials, and based off of some other aspects and structures in society, the pyramids were not graves. There's not a molecule of evidence regarding any of the pyramids that had anything to do with graves whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. What there is evidence for is the pyramids are an electromagnetic radio telescope. They, as EM waves hit the stones, the sandstone and the granite, that infrastructure hits the stone then compresses a little bit. The quartz inside the quartz inside of limestone and quartz releases electricity. It travels down the gold pathways and the gold lettering and some of the copper to what has been falsely labeled as, remember the propaganda, has been falsely labeled as funerary temples. They're not funerary temples because there's no bodies. What they are is listening laboratories to be able to, for people, for either some kind of device in there to record the electromagnetic wave, the frequencies and the waves to hit the rock, it to compress, and then send an electrical signal to the laboratories, and those laboratories would then be able to record those impulses, those electrical impulses in some way, shape, or form. Specifically, why, who, what, when, where, why, and how, that's an extreme mystery, because we don't want to think of the Egyptians as having an understanding of astronomy and or astrology, but obviously based on the mathematics of what was left behind, and the fact that it took them 300 years to build it, and the pyramids are over the area of 300 square miles. 1, 2, 3, 300 square miles, 300 years to build. Let's see here if there's any connections here. Or is there any consistencies in the number 3 in this situation? Well, yes, there is. More than a few. 3 rivers and there's a and backup there's three different backup capitals for the for New France for the French royals to be able to evacuate out of the area in order to be able to have a safe place to go. Well, there's three backup capitals. There's New Orleans, there's St. Louis, and then there is whatever Old Carter City used to be called. So you have the infrastructure of a the infrastructure of a the infrastructure of a lost my train of thought. You have the infrastructure of an electromagnetic radio telescope in the pyramids, which most of that infrastructure and such carried over to marble is also extremely high in quartz. So when the city was made almost entirely of quartz, every footstep, every electromagnetic wave, every ceremony, every group activity pushed down on the marble that released small degree amounts of electricity, which then was collected and dealt with in unknown numbers of ways because all that information was hinted at but not documented because it scared the later Romans too much and the early Christian church. It scared them so much that they wanted to erase it entirely from existence by destroying the paperwork and destroying the city itself, which is in effect what happened. So, what happens when you have attacking armies? Well, what happens when you have attacking armies is the home army, the home culture evacuate. Well, in this specific situation, from Egypt to first Carter Springs and then Whatcom County, Washington State, the enemy kept chasing the British from X to Y because the original name of the British was Trojans, although that's not entirely accurate. That's a really deep insult to the people living there. It means basic Trojan in whatever language that the Agamemnon's people used. The word Trojan actually translates to descendants of Jacob. Well, although technically speaking, it's not sons of Jacob. It means the descendants of the holder of the foot. Well, in Sumerian, holder of the foot translates to Jacob, so you have the rather obvious situation regarding that infrastructure is quite literally the Trojans are literally their name translates to descendants of Jacob, which would be the offspring of Jacob, which would be the Jews. So they weren't really called Jews. They were not really called descendants of Jews. Jacob. They were called. The Iliad is actually Ilia is the name of the city. Well, since it was the name of the city, then they would be Ilians, which is not all that far away from a name that was allowed to be kept, which was Ionians, which they're basically kind of neighbors to each other on the Italian Anatolia Peninsula. So you have a mountain of going on here. So there is some etymological and architectural infrastructure that indicates that at some point in the late 1400s, early 1500s, middle 1500s, early 1600s, before the droves of English and Spanish and the like came across the pond to be able to mass murder, genocide, kill, take over, and do all kinds of really inappropriate behavior, including having slavery. There's infrastructure to be found on the American continent in that specific area of start from Tulsa and work your way around to find some kind of a electromagnetic radio telescope or some kind of a copy of the pyramids. Now, is there any physical, tangible evidence of this, of any kind of connection, anything at all regarding the pyramids in the Americas? And the answer is absolutely, positively. Oh my, wow! There's a lot of evidence. Well, the evidence is southern Italy, and in southern Italy, you have a place that on a lot of maps you will find a area, and its capital being Kaskaskia, which is a city of pillars. At least was. Only a couple of the buildings are still in existence, and they're not doing that well. Kaskaskia It's a fantastic, tiny little city, which was the first capital of Illinois, but it's also Kaskaskia was the capital, or at least some association with a place called Little Italy, Little Egypt. So you have Little Egypt that's just outside of. It's Little Egypt is in this general neighborhood of those three rivers that are Shin, at least semi close to the concept and the character of Shin. Now the graphic that I drew that Instagram cannot see, but YouTube will be able to see, is a direct copy of the infrastructure, the architecture of the Khufu pyramid, which is the first pyramid. You have Judefre, then you have Khufu, then you have Khafre, and then you have Menkaure. Well, this pyramid, its infrastructure is this 1/3, 2/3. This is the infrastructure of the Khufu pyramid. So you have the Khufu pyramid is one of the reasons why the British and the French and such spotted those rivers and then started to build their infrastructure, which they had about 2.5 centuries to build before it was obliterated, is because it matched Shin so well. So they thought it was a sign of God that on this continent that this is where they were supposed to rebuild the pyramids, for lack of a better description, rebuild Rome, for lack of a better description, and start building cities of pillars. That one of those cities of pillars would be not only Kaskaskia, but original Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was a city, a castle fortification to protect Manitou and Old Carter City from any invaders and such. So, and this is my second recording of about 40-45 minutes, and I'm just scratching the surface about what's going on here. And the infrastructure of what's happening it's many times more complicated than this 90-minute combined lecture. My name is Carter Spring. My name is T.R. Welling, and I invite you to subscribe to my channel and to like my videos and to ring for the bell, because I'll be making more videos over time. Thank you very much for watching.